I mean, the things that we learn in failure, you can't learn with repeated success. Like, it's impossible.
Can't, yeah.
So to have an opportunity to fail is incredibly valuable.
Welcome to the Made Leader Podcast, where exceptional leadership isn't about who you are, but who you choose to become. Join your host, Jen Arnold, for expert interviews, real-world stories, and practical advice that transforms managers into exceptional leaders. If you're a middle manager ready to unlock your potential, this is your podcast. Let's get started.
Hey there, and welcome to the Made Leader Podcast. I'm your host, Jen Arnold. If you are a leader, then you know leadership growth is a journey filled with many ups and downs. Although it doesn't feel like it at the time, it's the challenging moments that teach us the most. That's why today I'm excited to introduce you to Turchi. Anne has been driving organizational change and growth at for-profit, higher education, and non-profit institutions for over 20 years. As Director of Organizational Effectiveness and Transformation at Columbia Sportswear, she has supported both enterprise change initiatives as well as functional initiatives to transform team collaboration through agile ways of working. What I really enjoyed about my conversation with Anne is how openly she shares her leadership journey, starting from running tennis camps in her early days to leading these complex organizational change initiatives. But here's what makes Anne a special leader. She doesn't just talk about her successes. Rather, she dives pretty deeply into how she's learned from missteps along the way and how important it is to create those environments where it's safe to fail. And that's what she embodies as a leader with her team. Now, you're going to hear some practical strategies for fostering your own growth, like the WAIT principle. Why am I still talking? And then also how to shift from being directive to becoming more of a coach for your team and why it matters. So whether you're struggling with being too hands-on with your team or you're looking for ways to create a culture where learning from mistakes is celebrated, Anne will offer you insights that you can apply right away in your leadership role. So without further ado, let's jump into my conversation with Anne Turchi.
Anne, welcome to the Made Leader Podcast. I'm so glad to have you on today.
Thank you.
Well, let's talk about your current role. So you are the Director of Organizational Effectiveness and Transformation, which is quite a wordy title, but
Yes.
What does a typical day look like for you?
Yeah, one of the things I love about my job is that every day is different. So what we have in common, I have a team, but it's made up of three distinct groups, and we're internal consultants and problem solvers. And so we do have sort of buckets of problem solving work that we do, but the problems are always new. They're always different. They keep us on our toes. I love a hard problem, something that, I've never seen before, a way in. And so we have like a few tools that we use to unpack the problem, to figure out how to solve it, and then to really help the people that we're serving get more insight into how to solve that problem. And so when I think about this consulting work, I think about it in two categories. I think about the what and the how. And on the how, on the what side, it's kind of the strategic piece. What should we do? How do we engage? And this is all internal work. So I'm not in strategy for my company, but I'm doing work in the human resources department. So it's about employee engagement. It's about change management. It's about people analytics. So what are the best ways we can do to improve the experience of our employees? We have human-centered design tools and other things that we use to help us guide our leaders in that way. And then on the how, it's around change management, project management, process. We work through prioritization. We have people analytics, data-driven decision-making. But across both, it's really around facilitation. It's around flexibility. it's around listening, and it's around problem solving. Those are kind of the things that both sides have in common.
Got it. And then how much of the work are you doing from day to day versus your team doing? Because I think that's sometimes leaders get pulled in and you still have a workload of your own.
Yeah, I would say at this point, very little. Sometimes I get to, and it's great, and it's fun to dip it back in. Um, I have a really tremendous team. They're so good. They're so much better than I am at like digging in. They're in it every single day. And so one of the things I think further down on the list is a question around like learning and growing myself. Getting out of their way, figuring out how to get what I need from them, but also getting out of their way and letting them do their work. Is always better. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So
yes. Then putting your foot in when, they, like you said, they're in it from day to day and they really are those subject matter experts.
Yeah.
And you just have a different lens, right?
Yeah.
Well, how did you initially get promoted into leadership? Like, how long have you been a leader? And what was your initial ascent into leadership?
Yeah. So after high school, I had a tennis camp. It was named after me, and I had kids that came, and then if I had too many kids for one court, I would add a second court, and I would call up one of my friends and say, "Hey, I need another tennis teacher for this other court." And sometimes we'd have 4 or 5 courts, and so I would have folks that would work for me in my tennis camp to get to teach tennis. So that was kind of my first job managing people, but was I really? I don't know. It did allow me to translate some of that experience so that when I graduated from college, I was able to get a role managing people doing youth development work based on experience.
Right out of college?
Yeah, I would say it was. So my first job out of college, I actually worked at a homeless transitional living program for homeless teens. And then about a year into it, I got a job at the YMCA where I led 5 before and after school program sites.
Gotcha. So it seems like you've always been in leadership. Have you ever had an individual contributor role, or have you always pretty much played in the leadership space?
I guess sometimes I did. I have direct reports. Sometimes I didn't. And then when I first took my current role, I started as an individual contributor. I had the job that I'm in now is a corporate job, but all of my experience was in nonprofit and higher ed. And so recognizing that I needed to make a transition into corporate, and that there were plenty of things that I had to learn about this new area of work. I ended up taking a job that was an individual contributor role just to kind of get my foot in the door, figure out if I liked it, what I liked about it. And then I was lucky to receive some promotions in that role as well. So.
Gotcha. So what do you think it was that got you promoted into a leadership role? Because I think there are probably individual contributors listening saying, oh, how do I get that role? Or, just thinking about promotion, what are the things that you think you did to earn the promotion?
Every role that I've had, whether I have direct reports or not, has really relied on my ability to influence and bring other people along, to listen to, as that internal consultant. I've been described before as an intrapreneur, which is different from an entrepreneur in that you're working to sort of create and advocate for change within a company as opposed to outside of one. But helping to listen to what other people are trying to accomplish and then provide useful insight into how they might more effectively accomplish that. And so I think I am, fairly good at managing up and kind of hearing what it is that we're trying to do and then connecting the tactics to what it is that leadership is trying to do, right? And trying to make the folks who are trying to execute on their roadmap look good and be successful. And yeah, I think that is, they find that very helpful.
Yeah. Well, also just thinking about your strategic background, right? Just to say that you've done the work to say, let me help create this strategic roadmap and figure out how to actually get it implemented. That's such a great leadership strength.
Yeah, they do. Depending on which consultant you're listening to and what time of day it is, they'll either say like culture eats strategy for breakfast or culture eats strategy for lunch, and culture eats strategy all day. And so being able to help sort of, somebody says, I want to get over here, I want to go from point A to point B, and for somebody to come in and say, well, here's a way that you can get there, can be, very valuable. So.
Yeah. Well, and how would you describe your leadership style?
I think I was trained really in leadership in the nonprofit space. And so they are very much sort of serving others and helping others succeed and thrive, which, then that lifts everybody up. So I don't do this perfectly, but on my best days, I really strive to serve and support at the right level. A few examples that I had thought of around this. One is I worked for a man named Bob Gilbertson, who led the Seattle YMCA, and I really admired his leadership. And the thing that I admired about him was he cared first about people as individuals and second about the work. And he did this consistently and always. And I really strive to be that kind of leader too, where I care about people as individuals and then they take care of how do I put in that extra effort to make the work get done. An example of that with Bob was when I was actually leaving the work for him. I had been teaching as an adjunct in an MBA program at a university. And they had offered me a full-time role as the director of their school of business. And I wasn't sure. I really liked my job. I liked working for Bob. I wasn't sure what I was going to do. But by the time I got up there to talk to him about it, I had decided that the opportunity was too good to pass up. And so I went into his office and I said, Bob, I've decided I'm going to take this other job. And he took a minute, like he kind of looked down. We'd worked together for 10 years, like we'd done a lot together. And almost without skipping a beat, he just got excited for me. And he was like, you're going to need a PhD. You're going to need this. Higher ed is that. And he just was full of joy for the fact that I had been given this opportunity. He didn't ask me, I would like you to, I'd like you to stay. He's like, this is a great opportunity. You need to do this. Like, here's how you can be successful. And it really, even in my departure, it was about me first, but it was always about me. Right. And I think he was that way with everybody that worked for him. Another example of this, was another leader that I worked with. I opened a youth art center in Camas, Washington, and I worked under a CEO named John Noland, who he was a CEO of this larger organization. And on my first day of work, he was giving me a tour of his building. And I remember walking with him down the hall, and there was a piece of garbage on the floor. And he just walked over and he picked up the piece of garbage and he threw it in the trash. And then we kept going. And it was a nonverbal cue, but it was very clear that this building belongs to everyone and this work belongs to everyone. And this is not the job of the custodian. This is not the job of somebody else. This is everybody's job.
Mm-hmm.
In contrast, I worked at another organization where there was a very different culture, and it was much more kind of hierarchical and autocratic. And I remember walking behind the leader of the organization and this leader's executive assistant, and they walked directly by like a old pack of cigarettes that was on the floor of this beautiful campus. And they just walked right by and nobody stopped to pick it up. And I just remember seeing them do that and seeing my contrast of this other leader that I worked with and going, I want to be the leader that picks up the garbage and throws it in the trash. when I'm with my team to show them that this is everybody's job. So
Right. So
that
it's
is how
actions.
I try to show up that way. I try to, I want to delegate, I want to lead, but I also want to make folks feel like we're in things together and that service to others is part of our job. And it's really important, right? Even more important as you grow in your leadership role, that you're still serving other people. You're still bringing treats to the meeting. You're still doing the work of service in
Yeah.
leadership.
Well, has it changed over time? I mean, when you think about you starting out in leadership in college,
Yeah.
running a tennis camp, doing all of these things. I mean, you've been a leader over some years. And so how has it changed?
Yeah, it has. I mean, I think for me, I know and have known and have had worked for some really, really good leaders over time. And so for me, maybe it's not that the sort of my aspiration has changed. I was lucky enough to have some great people that I worked with, but it's more just practicing and developing an awareness of where I am sort of competent in that area or where I need to lean in and focus. And so over the years, getting better at asking questions, making sure that I am asking more questions rather than making statements, giving other people the chance to have the floor. There was a book I read once that I don't remember what it was called, but they had this acronym called WAIT.
Mm-hmm.
Why am I talking? That is very applicable to me, right? Why am I talking? Can I can I be quiet and let somebody else talk? Can I guide? Can I be patient? Can I let somebody do something that's a little bit different than the way that I would have done it?
Right.
Might get a better outcome. So some of this is just making sure that I have enough self-awareness to evolve my style so that I can get sort of closer to that aspirational place that I want to go. And then also creating enough safety with the folks around me, both that I report to, but also the team that I manage, that they will tell me if there's something that they notice that I can do differently that would make it more effective.
So when you talk about self-awareness and obviously you have the growth mindset, I'm going to keep learning and growing over time, but how do you figure out where to focus? Is it from people giving you, hey, I've noticed giving you some feedback? Is it you going, ooh, that didn't go well? Is it,
Yeah.
like, where have you gotten some of this information in the past?
Yeah, it's such a blessing when you get the experience that didn't go the way you wanted. And then you get a moment with someone who's willing to help to process with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to be like, well, what could you have done? What could you not have done? And to have both of those things for me and then, to have another opportunity to try, right? So you have it, didn't go well, you can reflect, you can talk, and then you get to try again, right? And, I have had a recent experience actually in an organization I was volunteering with where things were not going well, but I didn't have someone who could help me sort of sit with and process and understand how I was contributing to, not contributing, like what that was. I just had sort of negative experiences where I wasn't leading
Mm-hmm.
effectively, and I didn't know how to change my leadership to become more effective. And so it ended up being, a fairly large failure, in my opinion, because I wasn't able to sort of get that. So you need both, right? You need like a safe space to process and reflect on what you could have done differently, but you also need to be free to fail and free to try something new and then have it not go well and then have a boss or a peer or a direct report who is willing to
Mm-hmm.
kind of help you
Yeah.
process through.
Right. Right. So for that negative experience you're talking about, you just knew it was the outcomes weren't what you wanted and it was just a bad situation, but there wasn't anyone there to coach you or to even just draw
Right.
out those questions, that person that you could talk to say,
Exactly.
what was
I
going on.
I was not showing up as the leader that I wanted to show up as. And I was just working as hard as I possibly could to show up differently. And I would try, and I would try this way, and I would try this way, and I would try this way. And it just wasn't working. And so, ultimately I ended up leaving that role. But, I have to believe that had I had someone there to kind of help guide, coach, support, I could have been a little bit more effective in that role. Or maybe I could have reset my expectations about what success looks like in a different way, right?
Right. Right. That must have been a really tough experience, just trying, like, especially just when you try this, no, that didn't work. Let me try this. That didn't work. That is a very, head banging against the wall situation. It's just
Yeah.
frustrating.
Yeah. It can be hard. And, I have to say that through that particular failure, I learned a tremendous amount, and I will continue to learn a tremendous amount. But I wish that it wasn't a learning experience for me. It was a successful leadership opportunity
Right.
for me. And so, you only get those sometimes. But
Yeah. I mean, I personally, I guess I've learned the most from my failures. I mean, it sucks. It's terrible in the moment, but looking back, you can see maybe a few different things differently,
yeah.
but also know what you need in a role, right? So you need someone who's going to give you some kind of feedback or have that, safe person to go to.
I mean, the things that we learn in failure, you can't learn with repeated success. Like, it's impossible.
Can't, yeah.
So to have an opportunity to fail is incredibly valuable. It's incredibly valuable.
It is. I just wish that we would look upon it different in corporate America. Like if a position doesn't work out, instead of a demotion, you're like, oh, guess that wasn't a good fit. Let's get you somewhere else. Like it's part of the stigmas because that's just how it is, right? You don't work out in a certain role or the leadership, leading a certain team, it wasn't right. Like it just didn't fit.
Yeah.
We learn a lot. But unfortunately, it's looked down upon. So we take those experiences, learn from them, and become better leaders.
Yeah, it's also, within a role, creating a safety and celebration for learning and failing, right? Or for trying new things. And how do we create opportunities for people to try something, to stretch into something, and then to say that didn't work? I'm going to give it another try in 6 months, or I'm going to do something, but to say, hey, I didn't get the outcome I thought I was going to get. I mean, even within my role, I had a meeting back in December where I thought, I walked in with one expectation. The folks around the table had a completely different, like I just completely read the room and the people and everything completely wrong. It didn't turn out sort of how I expected. I didn't get what I wanted to get. And so my approach is to reflect, to think about it and be like, you know what, I'm going to try again in like April, right? Let's try again. Now that I have heard, I know I reflected on sort of what I could have done or what insight I could have brought into that, and then try again. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that you're willing to try again. I want to go something you said. How do you create that safety for failure among your team? Like, are there your specific tactics you use? Is it just giving people stretch opportunities? Like, what are the things that you do?
Yeah, a couple things. One is we have a retro board. We always open the retro board the beginning of whatever body of work it is that we're doing. And and then throughout we remind people, here's the retro board. Make sure you're putting feedback, make sure you're sharing. And then we share at the end, like, how did this go? And everything, no matter where it is in the cycle, whether it's really early and we're making lots and lots of mistakes and we're trying to sort everything out, or we're much later in the process. And, the feedback is that they wanted their eggs to be scrambled and not boiled. Like, there is a lot of power in the ritual of, we're going to always look at what we want to improve, not just when something didn't meet expectations. Every single time, what is it that we're going to do differently? And then the other piece of that is personally, I think that when people offer feedback to us personally, and this goes with, we're all humans, right? This is subordinates, but it's peers, it's people above me, creating safety for someone to be honest, right? And to say what it is. And so the way that I have found is really helpful is if I get some feedback from someone, if they're brave enough to share something with me, I thank them. I think about it. I try it. I get back to them. I say, hey, you told me this. This is how I tried to apply this. And this was the result. And I just want to make sure that that I'm working on this, or that I want to, so that they know that what they're sharing is valuable, and that I am really being thoughtful about applying it, and not saying, oh, you told me this, and so I've written you off, right? Or anything like that. So.
Yeah, I think it is helpful just to say thank you for the feedback, and then you're actually taking that next step and doing something with it.
Yeah. Well, and also like not being defensive, if somebody says you said this or you did this, and I don't, it didn't rub me the wrong way. Recently there was something, I sent something that was kind of a lighthearted tone, and there were some folks who, thought that in the situation, the tone was too lighthearted, and that it was a little bit tone deaf. And I sat with that. I thought about it. I was like, I wasn't intentional. Like I need to be, there were takeaways. I didn't necessarily agree with that I won't use a lighthearted tone. At the same time, recognizing, that the feedback that I can take away from that is my audience, and understanding my audience, and how big and broad the audience is, and the variety of the ways that different people are thinking about and processing information. Sometimes being lighthearted is not appropriate. And, even if I err kind of on that side.
Yeah, like what you just said is that you don't always have to agree.
Yeah.
Right? Someone can give you feedback. Thank you for the feedback. And, I hear what you're saying, and I get it. And in this instance, maybe it made sense, but I'm still going to use a lighthearted tone when I feel like it's appropriate if I read the audience. And that's, what I deem as a good choice.
Yeah. But if these people think that I didn't listen, or I don't value somebody saying that, giving me the opportunity to think about and reflect on, like, is this truly how I want to show up for everyone? Could I have done something a little differently? Like the last thing I want is for somebody to think that this risk that they're taking and being vulnerable and sharing something with me is not going to be received well or accepted, or I'm going to be like, well, that's just you. That's just you. Right. And
right.
It's not. So.
Right. So it is thanking them at the end of the day. So, you talked about some of your strengths, which are growth and development, creating that safety and that trust with your team, and really serving your people. But what remains a challenge for you as a leader? Because I don't know one leader that didn't have a challenge, something that still gets you.
Yeah. I talk too much. So making sure that I use that, like, why am I talking? Making space. Sometimes, especially when I am under stress or things are moving very quickly, I can lean into being a bit directive. Somebody comes to me and says, I'm having this problem. And I say, okay, do this. Right. And what I need to do is like stop, ask that, like, what solutions have you thought of? What, and to sort of use them as development opportunities. But when I'm not at my best, I kind of am very directive. I'm more telling than asking. Sometimes I can lose patience. I have found, as I have developed as a leader, that you can actually move a lot faster if you just get out of your own way, and get out of other people's way. And so,
what do you mean by that? Getting out of your own way?
Like, the person that's coming to you with the problem probably already knows what they think they should do about it.
Mm.
So why am I talking and not asking them what they think they should do about it? Right?
Got you. So taking more of a coaching approach as opposed to a
Yeah.
directive approach.
Yeah.
Got you.
Yeah. That's, and just, I always, I just admire so much like that great question. I feel like if I getting at like a really, really good question, I actually had someone coached me who was like so brilliant, and he had observed me in meetings, and he was sort of, I was going to take on this leadership role. And he said, Anne, you're at your best when you ask a question that does not betray your opinion.
Mm.
So you ask the question, and then you let other people sort of explore, do the work, sort of think through, process. And that was such a valuable piece of feedback to receive that I really, really try. I find it extremely challenging to get to like that good question. And then if we're in a rush, if we're stressed, I get impatient. And instead of finding the perfect question, I just say the thing I want to say and be done with it, which actually slows us down. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Well, thanks for admitting that, Anne, because it's not easy to admit that. And we all have that. I mean, when stress gets high, we go into our default behaviors, right? The ones that are not as restrained.
yeah,
we do talk too much, and then we're just trying to hurry things up. And that
yeah.
is very natural. When you think about gathering your people, so when you gather your team together, whether it's through some people have the stand-ups, the huddles, team meetings, one-on-ones, do you have anything that has worked really well for you or that you use on a regular basis?
I do. So I do offer, everybody on the team, we have the regular one-on-one meetings, as I think is fairly common. And, they decide how to structure the meeting, how long the meetings are, how frequent, what they need. For most of the people, we end up with like a running agenda where both of us can add to the meeting. So we know what's on the agenda when we enter. I have, because I support this people analytics function. I have a fair number of internal processors on the team, not just within that function, but
Hmm.
overall. And so it's quite helpful to give them, an agenda ahead of time, a little bit of time to process and think about whatever it is that I want to bring up. So that standing agenda is super, super helpful. Um, we do have team meetings with the whole group, although they're pretty different in terms of, the work, the scope of work that they're
Hmm.
doing. Um, and so when we do bring that group together, it's more kind of relationship building, connection, birthday lunches, that kind of thing than it is getting actual business done. We end up breaking the meetings down a little bit.
Hmm.
But, we're all, we're in the office on a hybrid schedule. So we have Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays that we're in the office, and we can drive by. Have lunch, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So when you're talking about with the agenda that your team, you just say to them, you schedule it, you let me know how much time you need, you start the agenda. So they're driving it as opposed to you being the one driving it.
For the one-on-ones are regular. So they're either, I have some folks that like to meet every week for half an hour. I have others who want every other week for an hour. Newer people or people taking on more complex work might want every week for an hour. So it's just sort of, how much time do you want? What do you want? And they schedule them. And then, yeah, we have kind of these running agendas and then, I don't cancel them. They can cancel them if they don't have anything that they want to talk about. Nothing on the agenda. I try not to move them. Sometimes when things get really busy, I have to propose new times for
Of
those.
course.
Because one-on-ones are just two people. And then when you end up sort of with these very large groups of busy people, you've got to sort of
Yeah,
reshuffle things. But yeah.
that's just reality. Um, in the last few minutes, do you think you could give advice to people who may want to get into a director role from where they are today? So whether they are a manager and they want to shoot up to that director, or if, they're just ready to get into leadership.
Yeah, I think, I do value and I appreciate career advancement and sort of being on this path. I think, though, that there are sort of two elements of that. One is the person who's developed themselves and is kind of ready to advance into a role. And then the other one is that there's a role for them that's right at the place that they want to work. And both of those things kind of have to happen at the same time. But usually what happens is somebody's ready and there isn't anything available. So they're kind of waiting. Or maybe they're saying, you know what? Advancing into the next level is important enough to me that I'm willing to move, or I'm willing to try something different, or, which is great. But I think what I can focus on and what folks, trying to advance can focus on is themselves and being open, being curious, figuring out sort of how they're effective, being really thoughtful and mindful about how they can grow and develop and where they can kind of lean in, listening between the lines around feedback that they're getting, and then being honest with yourself about why, both, what is it that appeals to you about kind of that next level, and then what is it that you think you can do to position yourself as not only and there's also like competition, right? So you have to be the best person out of the available choices to advance into that role. Sometimes it takes a long time. So
yeah, and being willing to move if you need to, if that's important to you.
Yeah. Picking what's important to you. I heard somebody once said, like, some people are like location people and they will do whatever they can, but they really value sort of staying in one place, raising a family in one place, doing things sort of in a location. And other people are like, I'll just go wherever I need to go to kind of have the life or the career that I want to have. And both are wonderful ways to live a life, right? But if you want to sort of stay and be sort of within a certain geographic area or a certain thing, you may advance a little slower because the opportunities are a little less. So
yeah, fair point. Well, Anne, before we close out, can you tell people where they can reach out to you if they have any questions or want to connect with you?
Yeah, I think LinkedIn is probably the best option. Yeah.
I will link up your LinkedIn profile in the show notes. But Anne, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you for this opportunity. I appreciate it too.